I'm a plumber, actually. I've been a plumber for about 40 years or more. And I have spent my life operating on the hearts and lungs and airways of children like this. And their hearts are quite small. They're like this. And we operate on the inside of them. It takes a lot of training and a lot of concentration, and of course it's a huge responsibility. But it's an immense privilege too. During that time, I've had to make stuff up because I don't often see the same thing twice. I've had to create operations and share created operations with other people. And I want to tell you a story about one child, this boy, Kieran, with his mother, Colleen, here. And Kieran has been in the first 10 in the world of everything that's ever happened to him. When he was born with a very narrow trachea, airway between his mouth and his lungs. And it was about as wide as this paperclip. And he couldn't breathe. And so he was placed on ECMO, which is like an artificial heart-lung machine, by the bedside through the artery in his neck and the vein in his neck, and transferred to us. And I enlarged his trachea with a patch, like putting a gusset in your trousers, just a little patch. And he did well for about 3 months, and then had to have a stent, a kind of wire netting stent, to push his trachea out because the patch shrank. He was one of the first 10 people in the world to have a metal stent in his airway. He did well for about 3 years, and then the stent eroded through his patch into his aorta, and he bled. His mother, amazingly, Colleen, resuscitated him. God knows how. And one Friday night, I did one of the first human tracheal transplants in the world on him. And he did well, although needing another stent, for 10 years. When the same thing happened, his stent eroded into his aorta, and he bled. Now, at no stage during the course of his treatment had we any real idea what the outcome would be. Everything we did was an innovation and an experiment that he and Colleen had to be partners in. When we did an operation, this last bleed, which was now 7 years ago, 6.5, 7 years ago, the transplants that we'd used before were no longer available because of the BSE crisis, and we had to think of something new. And there'd been one tracheal transplant in Barcelona into a lady using a stem cell approach. And we decided to gather together the team that had done that from Florence, Barcelona, Bristol, London, Hanover, to put together a way of transplanting a trachea into him using a stem cell approach. So we got a donor human trachea from Italy, removed all the donor cells from it by washing it in detergents and enzymes. And then on the day of surgery, we took some bone marrow from him. We'd stimulated his bone marrow and marinated that graft in stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, for about 4 hours, and gave him a bunch of chemicals to try and make them differentiate. The operation went really well. He had 7 centimeters of trachea transplanted into him. And we were all over the newspapers, and so was he. He's now 7 years later, fully grown, drives a tractor on his farm, plays drums in a show band in Ireland extremely well, I may say, and we're very happy about that. Now, that team that gathered together had all been doing research all over the world, pulling together ideas to try and make stem cell technology work, so we could take cells from your own bone marrow, convert them into what we wanted, and maybe grow organs in the lab. In this case, modify a trachea. Some of the work we'd done in that time was to try a plastic scaffold, not a donor scaffold, but a nanotechnology printed scaffold to see if it worked. But we couldn't make the cells stick to it in the lab. The surgeon who came to help us with this operation and had done some of the basic science is unbelievably charismatic, very handsome Italian. And it turns out that after he left us and gone back to do the rest of his work in other parts of the world, his career started to unravel. It started to unravel because he was accused of fraud in Italy. He was accused of a bunch of other things in Barcelona. He turned out to have been lying about the results of experiments that he carried out in Sweden and in Russia, using that plastic technique that we had rejected. And the patients that he was putting it in there were reported as doing really well, but were actually dying. And why does this matter? Why am I telling you this? Well, his lies and his fraud, if it's proved to be the case, have actually started to infect us, the rest of the community, doing this research, because now no one knows whether to believe the underlying practice. And whether we'll be able to do what we did to Kieran again, who knows? And I thought at that time that we should think very carefully about how we stop that, prevent it happen, because everybody lies. Maybe a white lie, maybe a lie, a small lie, that doesn't matter. And amongst doctors, the same proportion as the rest of the population are serial liars. We're not any different from anyone else who isn't a doctor. There are people who don't tell the truth and don't do it often. And so we need to find a way of protecting patients, the public, and us, the researchers, from people who don't tell the truth. And I want to kind of take you through an idea to explain that, because it matters. In the last 25 years, 186 surgical papers have been withdrawn by their authors in a whole variety of specialties from all over the world. Now, the reason they've been withdrawn is almost always because of data. Either they've copied it, or they've lied about it, or it's wrong, or they've just basically duplicated it from somebody else's work. It's all about the data. Healthcare is an information economy. We exchange information and data all the time. One of the reasons that this keeps going wrong is because of medical publishing and the way it works at the moment. I'm an academic surgeon. My career is completely dependent on how many papers I publish. So like a big pile, how many it's weighed. And if I don't have enough publications with enough impact factor and enough citations, I can't get a grant. And if I don't get a grant, the PhD students don't get their work done, and so on. So I want to propose what happens when I think of a new operation. And I've been thinking about it for some time. So I've probably got my mind around how to do it. I get permission in the hospital from the ethics committee, take it through all the routes, and I'm allowed to do it. Now, having been thinking about it for quite a long time, it's quite difficult to do animal experiments on some of the stuff I do, but I've got it sussed out in my head. And so maybe the first 10 operations or so that I do go well because we've all been talking about it. Now, I want you to know about it. So I need to get it out there into the world. And so I write a paper, a summary of a paper, with a narrative and a few diagrams, and send it to a journal, a medical journal, say the BMJ, the Lancet, New England Journal. And the editor of that will say, Christ, this isn't new. This is a fantastic thing to come across. What a great new operation. We should publish this. Let's see what the peer reviewers think. And they send the paper out to peer reviewers, who are, of course, people just like me doing the sort of job I do. And if they like it, they write back to the editor and say, cool idea, new thing, publish it. Now, it's in my interests to get that paper out there. It's in the journal's interest to publish it, and it's in the peer reviewer's interest, if they like it, and it's a reasonably good idea, to be amongst the first to do it next. Now, when you have a new operation, it's very often the case that the people who do it next and copy it don't quite have enough of the little details that I knew in my head when I first did this operation, and so they don't get quite such good results in that second wave. Now, are they going to publish their poor results? Is it in their interest to publish those poor results? Because maybe they don't feel they want to be compared with the good results that came first. Is the journal going to publish those results anyway? Because the journal's circulation comes from new stuff, new ideas, good things. So you've got a situation where they don't want to publish, the journal won't publish, and the peer reviewers never see it. Now, maybe that doesn't matter. But think of this, that those 10 patients that I did are now the definitive information in the medical literature. So worldwide, people are going to be reading this and copying this operation I've just thought of. And if they get bad results, what kind of responsibility do we as a scientific community hold for them screwing up? And what responsibility do we hold for those patients' lives who we've damaged? The data associated with that first operation are critical, and actually I own them. They're on a USB stick in my car, for example, on my laptop. I don't send the raw data, every detailed piece of information to the journal, only a summary, histograms, diagrams, possibly some narrative text. And so the raw data associated with my successful patients are lost. They're held by me. More importantly, the raw data associated with all the subsequent operations are also lost. What made those patients not do so well can never be discovered. So we've lost the important responsibility of accumulating data which would allow us to understand what's going wrong and prevent any long-term complications happening in other children. I want to propose to you that we're doing peer review at the wrong time. What matters is the data, as I've said before. Data are ruling everything here. So if we were to design a data set, an empty spreadsheet, if you like, where each field was properly defined, and you, as the public or other scientists, had the opportunity to review what I was going to collect on my patients, then there'd be very little argument about whether I collected the right stuff. I could go ahead and collect those patients, the data on those patients, and we need another couple of rules. I believe that no surgeon should be allowed to carry out a new procedure without contracting to submit a validated dataset, the dataset that's been open to peer review, to an honest broker, say somewhere in the cloud that holds data securely and privately, but to which you, other researchers, other scientists, regulators, hospitals, parents, patients, can have access to those data and play with them and see if they can get a better conclusion than mine. Those data are public, they should not be mine. I should not be able to lie about them because you can see them. Here's the totalitarian bit. I don't think any patient should be allowed to have that procedure unless they agree to use their data in this way. This is maybe threatening, but I don't think it really is. Because if it's a new operation, if it was a randomized controlled trial, you would be deciding that you would have the treatment or not, but you wouldn't know which arm you were in. Not any fundamental difference. And we know now that you get better treatment if you're in a trial than if you're not. So the data drive high-quality medicine as well. The data are everything in this story. If we believe what's going on in the world at the moment in this country, there's this sort of tremendous negative attitude about medical data, that we shouldn't have access to it, we shouldn't release it to the community. It's somehow ours and dangerous if we release it out. Well, of course, in some ways it is. If we sell it on to an insurance company, perhaps that is the case. But there's a much more altruistic reason here, where we could, as a community, contribute to the pool of knowledge in a much better way. When blood donation was started, or blood was used as therapy, it was originally investigated as a potential market. And it was only Richard Titmuss at the LSE who suggested in the end that donation was a much more rational way of dealing with such a valuable resource. In the modern era, data are the valuable resource. And we as a community need to make the best of it that we can. Unless you can see the data, you as a community can play with the data, scientists everywhere can look at it, and if they're held by an honest broker, we have the opportunity to change this. It's a huge threat to medical publishing. The whole mechanism is threatened, because why would you have a journal? What do you need that for? The whole essence of my promotion pathway within the university is threatened. They can't weigh my papers if I do it that way. My ability to get grants is threatened, because conventionally that's how we do it. But the truth is it's a flawed way, and if we were in astrophysics or mathematics or statistics, we would be obliged to send the raw data to the journal and possibly a draft of the paper in advance for scrutiny before we even allowed it to be published. For public scrutiny, scientific scrutiny by your peers. We don't do that in medicine, and I think we should be ashamed of it. We have to find a new way of getting the information complete, validated, and out there. This is a great American juror who was talking about the importance of making the law public, making it open to everybody. And he summed up this concept of transparency in data very beautifully by saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant. And to my mind, the problem with the lies in medical science at the moment is because the data are hidden. The ownership is wrong. The ownership of data needs to be much more public, and we as the public need to have a different perception of how we deal with it. That's hard to do, and it's a cultural change for both sides. Now, I don't know if you know, but the most common cause of death amongst cardiac surgeons is drowning. Because by the time they realize they can't walk on water, they still can't keep their mouth shut. So I should stop now. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.